how is it that in the grihast life, how do we experience and dive into these different paths of yoga, of spiritual connection, karma, bhakti, gyan? How do we do that as people living grihasti lives? So we'll talk about that for a little while, and then we'll open it up for questions. When you think about these paths, it's important to realize that they're not paths given to us for sannyasis. This wisdom was given by Bhagavan Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna, a warrior, a family man on a battlefield. So this is not about how to be a sannyasi 101. In fact, when Arjuna said, I don't want to fight this war, forget it, I'm going to go off into the caves, go off into the jungles, I'm just going to meditate. Bhagavan Krishna essentially said, not so fast, no such luck, no you won't. So the teaching of this path is a teaching for the battlefield. It's not how do we adapt it to a battlefield. It's a teaching for the battlefield. Not just the battlefield of Kurukshetra. It's the battlefield for us, the battlefield of our lives. Meaning this internal battle within us between light and darkness, truth and untruth, ignorance and wisdom. You'll notice I didn't say good and bad because we don't so much think about things as good and bad. We are all divine at the core of who we are. It's not about becoming good. It's about remembering who you are. It's about wisdom. It's about light. It's about truth. To remember who we are. Now, it's also important to realize that these paths are not separate. It's not three parallel, never intersecting paths that are just different ways of getting to the same place. They actually intersect and they overlap. So for example, think about falling in love. Okay? And think about falling in love with a human being before we even get into love for God. Just think about regular love for a human. Well, as you fall in love with someone, two things happen. Number one, you want to know everything about them, right? In the early days, it's awake all night long. And what was your favorite movie? What poetry do you like? What are your dreams? What are your fears? Tell me about your childhood. Tell me this. It's all, how can I know more about you? And we serve. It's the internal impulse, instinct, long before anybody asks you to do anything, that says, honey, I made you breakfast in bed. I thought let you sleep. Chalo aaj chai main bana leti hu. Here it is. Mujhe laga sone do. चलो यहाँ पे ही लेते हुए आप नाश्ता करो मैं लेके आई ऊपर. What makes you do that? Love. Just, you're in love. The simple act of being in love automatically brings about a quest for knowledge and brings about karma. So that's just on the most basic, superficial, simple level of where, beginning with bhakti, we find ourselves in the midst of Gyan and karma. You begin with Gyan, right? This is more of how you could think of an arranged marriage, right? Rather than love marriages, we're in love first, we learn about each other afterwards. Arranged marriage, well, that's more of, you have to fall into love. You meet, you learn about each other, start being together, start living together. Slowly, 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 the more you learn about each other, love starts to blossom. And then, of course, as it blossoms, there you are bringing breakfast in bed. But here we've started with Gyan. From that Gyan, Bhakti has grown. So from Bhakti, Gyan grows. From Gyan, Bhakti grows. From both of them, karma grows. But sometimes it begins with karma. So many stories of patients falling in love with nurses, nurses falling in love with patients. Why? Or doctors, why? Because as you serve someone, as you help them, and of course not only nurses and doctors, but so many, right? I mean, these are scandals that brew, right? A boss and a secretary, and this and that. Why? Because in the service, in the action, the more you serve someone, automatically love starts to blossom. So it may begin in karma, and then bhakti grows. You begin in karma, then Gyan grows, then bhakti grows. So they all actually intersect. Now let's look at this more specifically from your lives. Let's take them individual. What does karma look like in our day-to-day lives, in a grihasti life, in a family, in a business? Well, karma literally means action. That's what the word means. Now, what Bhagwan Krishna makes very clear is we are always acting. So it's not about let's do karma. We're always doing. Everything we are doing is a karma. You get up in the morning to meditate, that's a karma. You hit the snooze button and go back to sleep, that's a karma. Either way. You give money to charity, that's a karma. You buy a car instead, that's a karma. You put the money in the bank, that's a karma. Stick it under your mattress, that's a karma. Everything we do is karma. So we can't not act. So what do we mean when we talk about karma as a spiritual path? Well, it means living consciously. It means recognizing that everything I do is having a ripple impact on the world, is having a ripple on my life. Is having a ripple impact on me in this life and my next life. That's the fruit of karma that we talk about. So how can I live consciously? Well, this is where our meditation comes in. Most of what we do is just reaction. We literally spend most of our lives like Pavlov's dogs. Right? Everybody know the story of Pavlov's dogs? So one of the most famous science experiments, I'm a scientist by heart and by experience and by interest. So I love where science and spirituality intersect. So a very, very famous, long time study was a study of a scientist named Pavlov who wanted to see whether they could link stimulus and response in animals. And so what he would do is he would ring a bell just before he would feed the dogs. Simple thing. Instead of just putting out the food, he would ring a bell first. What they discovered is very quickly, the ring of the bell was enough to get the dogs to start producing saliva in their mouth. Long before the food arrived. Long before they could see it or smell it. With just a few times of ringing bell, getting food, ringing bell, getting food, the dogs started to salivate at the simple sound of the bell. Now, a lot of us act like those dogs, meaning something happens in our world and we simply react. Even when they stopped feeding the dogs after ringing the bell, the dogs kept salivating. It was like they couldn't stop. Even if no food was coming, still they reacted by salivating. And a lot of us live in this way. We just react. Someone says something, they do something, we lose ourselves. We get angry, we get sad, we slap, we punch, we hit, we yell, we dive into alcohol or chocolate cake or Facebook or whatever we do in reaction to feeling upset, feeling hurt, feeling betrayed, feeling angry. But we just react. Something happens, we react. I'm having a great day, then someone says something to me. I get an email, I get a message. One of the stocks I'm holding falls. One of the stocks I'm not holding, a competitive stock, rises. Suddenly, my happiness is over. It's a reaction. And that's how most of us live. We're not actually acting consciously, we're just reacting to what happens in the world. So when we speak about karma, it's about being conscious, being aware. There's a moment, there's a space between a thought that we have and a reaction. So someone says something to me, and I think I had no choice but to hit. Right? Kids say this all the time. You say to a kid, why'd you hit your brother? Well, he hit me first. Usne mujhko mara. Main kya karu? Now, sadly, we actually bring this into our adulthood. Maybe we don't hit like children, but we speak, we act like it. वो तो उसने ऐसे किया मुझको, मैं क्या करूं? दिखाना तो पड़ा मुझको उसको. क्या समझते आप अपने आप को? I had to show him, I had to show her, I had to respond. धन्यवाद, thank you. So we act like we have no choice. Real karma means being conscious. Grabbing what my guru Puja Swamiji calls that space between a thought and an action. The thought comes in and says, how dare you? Who the hell do you think you are? Main dikhaungi tumko. And then there's an action. A word I speak, something I do with my hand, some email I send, something I do. But there's actually a space between it. I don't have to send that email or send that text message or speak those words or raise my hand. We are not Pavlov's dogs. We are not simply a stimulus response mechanism. We are human beings. And human beings are seen as the pinnacle of evolution, the highest evolution because we have that ability. So we have to use it, be mindful, be conscious. Somebody else may have acted in anger, in jealousy, in frustration, in ignorance, in ego, इसका मतलब नहीं है कि मुझे भी करना पड़ेगा. जो उसने किया वो उसका कर्म है, फल उसको खाना पड़ेगा. लेकिन जो मैं ही करूंगी उसकी फल मुझे खाना पड़ेगा. And you can never use the excuse, well, they did it to me first. Just like parents don't buy it, God doesn't buy it. Right? If one of your kids says, well, they did it first, you'd say, fine, I'll deal with them later. Now let's talk about what you did. Same thing. So we have to be conscious and mindful. Is this action really where I want to go? And then we go back even further before the actions, because what gears our actions? Our thoughts. And just as thoughtless actions are a problem, so are actionless thoughts. If I have a good thought but I don't act on it, I decide I'm going to meditate every day, I decide I'm going to start living a more spiritual life, but I don't. That's an actionless thought. And that's just as detrimental as a thoughtless action. So we have to look at our thoughts, because our thoughts are guiding our actions. First is the thought, who do you think you are? I'll show you. How dare you? So we have to watch our thoughts first. I always say our thoughts are vehicles. They take us someplace. Now, if somebody said to you, guess what? I just bought a brand new car, or a brand new boat, or a brand new airplane. Come, sit in it. We're going on a trip. Plush seats, wonderful. Come, I'll take you in my car, I'll take you in my plane, we're going on a trip. You gonna go? What are you gonna ask them? Where are we going? And if they say, oh, we're going to hell, we're going to misery, we're going to sadness, we're going to depression, would you go? No matter how plush the seats are, no matter how good the entertainment may be, best airline in the world, free first class ticket to misery. Anybody gonna take it? Of course not. But when our thoughts arise, when a thought, for example, of competition or jealousy or grudge or judgment arises, and we jump on it, we allow it to overpower our mind. Well, we know where that's going. How many times have we ridden the train of jealousy or competition or judgment in our lives? Come say come. For many of us, it's every hour. Koi na koi thought aa jate hain. We jump on that thought. What do we find? We're miserable. The more we think about that, the more miserable we are. So why do we keep getting on it? If you know this plane is going somewhere I don't want to go, you gonna get on it? Of course not. You're gonna just wave it by. So in the same way, if you want to have conscious karma that's taking us where we want to go in our life, moksha ki oor, shanti ki oor, anand ki oor, well, we have to begin by watching our thoughts. They're the gasoline in the engine that's driving the vehicle. And make sure that you don't jump on any vehicles going places you don't want to go. So a thought arises, and you do the same thing that you would do when you're at the airport and you're sitting at the gate waiting for your flight, and there's an earlier plane, it's not yours. The gate agent says, last call, get on. And you just wave, or you do a namaste, or you give some signal ki main baithne wali nahi hu. Ye mera flight nahi hai. It's not कि अच्छा चलो है यहाँ बैठ जाते. You know कि that's not my destination. ठीक इसी तरह से जब कोई ऐसे विचार आते हैं तो उसको जाने दो. Like you would let the wrong flight, the wrong bus, the wrong train go. Just जाने दो. Bye. नहीं, मुझे नहीं बैठना उसमें. मुझे वहाँ नहीं जाना है. मुझे कहीं और जाना है. And this is the power of our meditative practices, to have that power over our thoughts. There's no one controlling our thoughts. Sometimes it feels like there's some other being in our mind and we have no control. But right now, just right now for a moment, I want everybody inside your mind, as loud as you can inside, just shout love in your own mind. Shout it again. Shout it again. Just keep shouting love as loud as you can in your mind. Could everybody do it? Can everyone do it? Just shout it loudly in your mind. Okay? So we can do it, right? We make a decision, this is what I'm going to think, and we think it. We do have the power. We just don't grab it. We let ourselves act like slaves, like victims to some pre-programmed sense. No. Karma means conscious thinking, therefore conscious acting. It also means on a very logistic level in our day-to-day life that we do one thing at a time, because it's very difficult to be conscious when we are scattered. The biggest thief of our ability to be conscious is distraction, multitasking. If I'm doing 10 things at once, there's no way I'm consciously doing them. If I'm being constantly distracted by a device that's ringing and beeping and blinging and vibrating, there's no way I'm able to be conscious. Then I am just like one of those dogs. It beeps, I look. It rings, I look. Doesn't matter what I was doing before. It flashes its light, now my attention is there. It's the master, I'm the slave. So we have to stop. Stop this multitasking. Stop allowing ourselves to be distracted. I'll give you a great, very scary statistic about distraction for anybody who wants to be effective in life. So they did a recent study in which they found that the average worker in the average company only can go 3 minutes on average at a time without being interrupted. Whether they're interrupted by some colleague leaning over their cubicle and talking to them, by their phone ringing, by some incoming email, incoming something on their device. 3 minutes on average, the average worker gets, okay? Now, that was part 1 of the study. Part 2 was, in 1 hour, just 1 hour, now an average workday is 8, 9, 10 hours, but in 1 hour of being interrupted every 3 minutes, the IQ of that worker drops an average of 10 points. Meaning you are 10 IQ points stupider at the end of an hour of being constantly interrupted than you were at the beginning. But here's an even scarier part of the study. If instead of working at all, you simply sat at your desk and you smoked marijuana, you took drugs for an hour, your IQ would drop by 5 points. What it means is that our way of working actually makes us stupider than if we simply sat at our desks and took drugs. Now you think, no wonder we're not on a global level achieving the things we want to be achieving. That we're not able to be solving the problems of the world that we're being presented with. Climate change, poverty, violence, war, environmental destruction, water shortages, food shortages. I mean, there's so much the world needs. And it's no wonder we're not able to solve our own problems in our life. Family problems, relationship problems, business problems, health problems, whatever it may be. Because being constantly interrupted and distracted is making us stupider than if we had a drug problem. So to be conscious, to act consciously, to really engage in karma, means I have to stop being distracted. And it means that I have to ask myself, what is the goal of this karma? One way of thinking is what for me? What am I going to get out of this? What's in it for me? Another way of thinking is what through me? How am I able to serve others through this? By asking what for me, we suffer. And we bring suffering to the world. By asking what through me, we actually find peace and joy, and we bring that to the world. And then you move into bhakti. Devotion, love. I mean, there's so much more to say about karma, but time is short and I want to open it for some questions also. You move into bhakti. Well, bhakti doesn't necessarily only mean sitting and doing puja. It doesn't only mean feeding God, worshiping God. It doesn't only mean that. Because what God tells us is I live in everyone. I live in all. We are told over and over again in all of our different scriptures and all of the different teachings that God lives in everyone. And not just every human, but every being. One of my favorite teachings is from the Upanishads that says, Isha vasyamidam sarvam, yat kincha jagatyam jagat. And it means everything in the universe is pervaded by the divine. And so bhakti means not just I close my eyes and I do worship of God in my mandir, but it means I actually look to see God everywhere. In my family members, in my employees, in my neighbors, in my suppliers, in the guy who fills up my car with gas, in the person who checks me out at the grocery store, in everybody I intersect my life with, in the trees, in the flowers, in the blades of grass, in the mountains, in the water, that I see everything as divine. And when I do that, then my love for God grows in my heart. And we talk a lot about bhakti ki shakti, that power of devotion. And that's the power that propels our life. I mean, love is an energy. Think about when you fell in love. Whether with your husband or wife, whether with your child when they were born, whether with your best friend. It's not always romantic love. But think about really loving someone. Now think about that being you love. Doesn't that fill you with energy? Being in love energizes us. Thinking about the person we love energizes us. You may be exhausted at the end of a day traveling on a work trip. And then you get a call from your kid. Hi, Dad. Hi, Mom. Suddenly you're wide awake. You wouldn't say, oh, I'm too tired to talk to you. Call me tomorrow. You might say that to your business partner or your secretary or your boss, but you wouldn't say that to the one you love because suddenly you're full of energy to talk to them. Oh, Beta, how are you? So happy to hear from you. How was your day? Just being in love fills us with energy. Being in love with God means that we have that opportunity to feel that energy all the time. Because we're able to experience the divine in all. And that's this beautiful power. And to see God in all. And so we serve. The same way that you bring breakfast in bed to your loved one. And it doesn't feel like mazburi, right? It's a joy. You don't feel like, "Are mujhe coffee banana pada." It's like, oh, right? It's exciting. Aaj main banaungi. It fills you with joy, excitement. This is that Shakti of Bhakti that propels us in karma, in seva. Because we love the one we are doing it for. Doing it is a joy. It's not a burden. And then Gyan. Well, Gyan is a beautiful pathway. It's a destination and it's also a path. It's both. As a destination, it's the place where we really know who we are. There's two ways of looking at the world. What I call the Hollywood way and what I call the Himalayan way. अभी इसमें आने से पहले कुछ लोगों को मेरी पुस्तक दिया, Hollywood to the Himalayas. We only had a few copies, I'm so sorry, but it's available online, it's available on Amazon, it's available. Yeah, Amazon is probably the easiest way. But I mention this because जो ज्ञान मुझको यहाँ आकर मिला है was the Gyan that transformed my life, that brought me from suffering to not suffering, that brought me from darkness to light, that brought me not just on a spiritual Gyan level, but on an everyday, minute to minute, moment to moment, living in stress, living in anxiety, living in depression, living in anger, living in grudges and grabbing and wanting and desiring and fearing, to living in freedom, to living in joy, to living in peace. It was that shift. The Hollywood way of thinking says you are your body. Its size, its shape, its color, its history, what's happened to it, its story, its role, its bank account, its career, its relationships, all of that drama that this physical body is and has gone through. That's who you are. And so we suffer. We suffer anger and grudges and pain at those who have wronged us in some way. We suffer guilt and shame for the mistakes that we've made. We suffer jealousy and competition where we feel like we are lacking in some way. We have a sense of not enoughness, not successful enough, not rich enough, not popular enough, not happy enough, not spiritual enough. Or constantly judging ourselves based on this thing. The Himalayan way of thinking says you have a body, but you're not the body. You are the soul. You are the spirit. You are consciousness. You are love. You are peace. That which happened to this body or through this body isn't who you are. Who you are, as Bhagavan Krishna tells us in the Gita, is unable to be burned by fire, unable to be wet by water or dried by the wind or cut with knives. It's unable to be abused, cheated, betrayed, lied to, harmed. It's unable to be any of these things that we tell ourselves we are, because you're not the story. And that for me is that pathway of Gyan, of really learning. And that on a personal level has been that which transformed my life, was this experience of, oh my God, I am not the story I've been telling myself about myself. I'm not the limitations I thought I had. I'm not the experiences I've had. I'm not the stress or the depression in my mind. I'm not any of these things. I'm whole, I'm complete, I'm divine, I'm full. And that was the greatest magic wand. And so that's what Gyan is. It's this awareness of who we are. But even on a more day-to-day level, Gyan is that jisse hum swayam ko puchte hain. Is this in alignment with my dharma? When we look at our actions, the karma we do, it's Gyan that makes us say, do I really want to engage with this karma? Do I want to jump on that thought? That's what Gyan is. That's where we need Gyan. Gyan says, no, I'm not going to jump on that thought that takes me to misery. Gyan says, no, I'm not going to engage in that action because I don't want the bitter fruit salad that's coming from it. I don't want that impact. It's not worth it. Gyan is that which says, stand up. Do your dharma. You may not think you can do it. You may be scared. You may be concerned, log kya sochenge? Kya bolenge? Samne wale kya sochenge? We lose our lives in worrying ki samne wala kya sochenge. Pura zindagi usme chale jate. Gyan is that says, I'm not answerable to samne wala. That is not the highest goal of my life, ki samne wale ko kuch kare. Parosi ko kuch kare. The highest goal of my life is to actually live my dharma. So Gyan is that which helps us really understand which karma to do, which not to do, which thought to jump on, which ones not to jump on. Gyan is that brings us all of that we're looking for. So all of this is very, very easily attainable in your lives. It was given, as I began with, it was given as teachings for people living a householder life, engaged in a battle. So it is for you. It's for all of you.